If Marcus Vane had known that signing up for the Intergalactic Open Tournament would end with him nearly being eaten by a slime wolf hybrid while a crowd of 20,000 aliens chanted his name like a karaoke anthem, he might have at least worn better shoes. Instead, he was wearing his favorite beat-up sneakers, one of which had a stubborn hole near the toe, and a t-shirt with an outdated meme that read, "I paused my game for this?" He had thought it was ironic. The sign-up booth hadn't corrected him. It all started with a trip he never meant to take. Marcus had tagged along with his cousin Jeff on a budget cruise through a part of the galaxy referred to by the locals as the spiral of slightly unpredictable outcomes. Jeff, in his usual hyperactive fashion, got distracted by a floating noodle bar and accidentally boarded a different ship entirely, which Marcus suspected might have been going toward a sun. That left Marcus alone on Elseron 5 with a data credit card, a basic translator implant, and nothing but time and a questionable sense of direction. The arena stood like a crown at the center of Elseron's capital, a giant, shimmering structure that seemed to shift colors depending on how nervous you were. At the time, Marcus assumed it was a circus, or maybe a very aggressive light show. A smiling insectoid vendor outside was handing out flyers while juggling glowing spheres and shouting, "Enter the arena of stars. Glory, honor, and lifetime spa passes await." Marcus had shrugged. Spa passes sound decent. Inside, the sign-up process had been surprisingly easy. A holographic form asked a few basic questions. Age, species, any allergies to antimatter. He checked no for everything, including the "Do you understand what this competition entails?" question, because he assumed it was a standard liability waiver. The first round involved dodgeball, sort of. He was given a reflective shield and dropped into a pit with bouncing plasma orbs that hummed like angry bees. His opponents were a trio of floating rocks with eyes, sentient geodes apparently, with names that translated to Greg, also Greg, and Greg 3. Marcus didn't know the rules, but he knew one thing. Plasma hurt, so he dodged, ducked, and accidentally discovered that the orbs bounced off his shield and redirected toward his opponents. Greg 3 exploded in a puff of glitter and rage. The crowd roared. The next round was weirder. Marcus found himself in a holographic maze filled with illusions designed to trigger fear. He stumbled past a replica of his middle school math class, fought a robot shaped like his ex-girlfriend's disapproving mother, and narrowly avoided an existential crisis after a sentient mirror asked, "Do you know who you really are?" "Nope," Marcus replied and broke it with a nearby chair. By the third round, he started to realize something very important. This wasn't a game for tourists. The other contestants were serious. Armored warriors from military dynasties, psionic tacticians who could melt steel with thoughts, a creature made entirely of knives, whose handshake he wisely declined. Marcus, meanwhile, had figured out how to use comedic timing as a survival tactic. When facing a venomous beast with 3 heads and a very low tolerance for sarcasm, Marcus had muttered, "Hey, you ever consider a career in children's television?" Which seemed to confuse it long enough for him to press the win button hidden under its foot. People started chanting his name, or at least what they thought was his name. The universal translator had trouble with Marcus and rendered it as Makris the Unyielding. He tried correcting them once. No, it's Marcus. Like Mark, but with a never mind." Each time he thought he was about to be eliminated, he somehow scraped through. When asked how, he'd mutter, "Sheer incompetence." But it sounded cooler when translated as unpredictable strategic chaos. Between events, Marcus was offered luxurious resting pods filled with scented vapor and gentle vibrations designed to simulate womb comfort. He declined those after the first use, citing creepy dream about dating a toaster. Instead, he sat alone in the contestants' lounge, chewing dried space beef jerky and watching replays of his accidental victories on a floating screen. He didn't notice the princess until the third day. She sat high in the royal balcony, a silhouette framed by cascading starlight, her features too distant to see clearly. But when he accidentally tripped into a vortex trap and survived by flailing into a tactical role that experts later described as questionably intentional, the camera cut to her. She was laughing, not politely, not nobly, just laughing. It was the first time anyone had looked at him like that since his university roommate caught him duct taping two fans together and calling it an instant Dyson. It unnerved him. After a week of trials, the final stage arrived. The arena crowd was larger than ever, stretching beyond the physical stadium and into the digital mindsphere. Banners displaying Marcus's awkward face, with hastily added battle scars and glowing eyes, waved in both real and virtual space. He wore armor someone lent him at the last minute. It looked impressive but had the consistency of bubble wrap and the protective power of a disappointed glance. His opponent was called Threxon, a champion from a world where gravity was 4 times Earth's and sarcasm was punishable by exile. Threxon stood 12 feet tall, wore armor forged in the heat of collapsing stars, and flexed with the confidence of a guy who knew the ending to every story he walked into. Marcus, of course, opened with, "So, is this your first tournament too?" Threxon swung a hammer the size of a compact car. 30 seconds later, Marcus was clinging to the edge of a floating platform, bruised, exhausted, and increasingly aware that his left arm didn't bend the way it used to. The crowd held its breath. A glitch in the platform's gravity gave Marcus one chance to leap, and in doing so, he fell forward, rolled again, mostly by accident, and ended up face first at the central terminal. His hand hit the activation rune. The arena flashed. Victory. The crowd erupted into noise so loud it warped the audio of the broadcast feed. Marcus lay on the floor, blinking, trying to remember if he'd fed his houseplants before leaving Earth. Then horns blared. He sat up. Trumpets, actual, polished, physically played trumpets held by floating orbs, filled the air with royal fanfare. The center stage opened, and a path of shimmering light formed from the far balcony to the arena floor. Figures in royal garb stepped forth. At their center walked a woman unlike any Marcus had seen. She looked mostly human, if humans had silver blue skin, long lavender hair that flowed like anti-gravity silk, and ears that stretched elegantly past her shoulders, ending in delicate filigree tips. Her eyes were starlight and storms. She stopped before him. "I am Princess Calarea of the House of Lern," she announced, her voice echoing, not through speakers, but through the very air itself. Marcus blinked. "Cool." She extended a hand and the crowd hushed. "By right of tradition and trial, I claim my consort." Marcus stared. "Wait, what?" The princess smiled. "You have won me. Congratulations, husband." And then the confetti started falling. Marcus's mouth opened and closed in a valiant attempt to form words, but the best he could manage was a high-pitched noise that sounded like a kazoo being stepped on. Somewhere in the arena, a large gelatinous spectator misinterpreted it as an expression of joy and started launching celebratory streamers from what Marcus prayed were its arms. 2 heavily adorned guards approached him, each one about the size of a refrigerator and built like it had wrestled one. They had golden armor, radiant sashes, and solemn expressions that suggested they took declarations of spontaneous royal marriage very seriously. "I think there's been a mistake," Marcus tried. "See, I was told the prize was spa passes, not a lifelong commitment." One of the guards tilted his head. The other replied, "Your request for massage can be scheduled after the coronation ceremony, husband of royal blood." Marcus flinched. "Let's back up. I'm not royalty. I once tried to eat spaghetti with chopsticks and almost set off a smoke alarm. I'm barely qualified to rule my apartment." Nevertheless, the guards lifted him, gently but firmly, by the arms and began escorting him across the arena floor. The crowd roared with enthusiasm. Digital fireworks bloomed in the sky above, forming what looked suspiciously like his awkward face from earlier, only now with a tiny crown hovering above his head. He turned his head as they approached a hovering platform with a throne made entirely of polished obsidian and what appeared to be humming circuits. Calarea stood beside it, hands clasped behind her back, looking perfectly composed, like someone who frequently declared spontaneous marriage in public. "Do you, do this often?" Marcus asked as the platform ascended toward what looked like the Imperial Palace, or at least a particularly well-decorated skyscraper shaped like a DNA helix having an identity crisis. Calarea regarded him with an amused tilt of her head. "Only once. That's oddly specific. Galactic law forbids multiple consorts. It causes dynastic confusion, not to mention the spreadsheet logistics. Marcus blinked. Wait, so this is real? Not a game? Not a weird promotion? No. He blinked again. Cool, 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 cool. The palace was even more impressive up close. Gleaming towers, floating gardens, and walls that shimmered like someone had skinned a rainbow and politely asked it to glow only in diplomatic shades. Marcus was led through halls lined with statues of past monarchs, each one looking increasingly less human and more dramatic. One was just a cluster of eyeballs holding a sword. Listen, Marcus tried again, once they were away from the roaring crowd and toward a chamber that appeared to be made entirely of crystal and possibly ego. I think there's been some wires crossed. I'm just a guy. Like, the guy. You know that guy who microwaves soup and forgets to take the metal spoon out? You won the Trial of Stars, Calarea replied. By law, you are now my betrothed. It was an ancient right passed down from the founders. Can the founders be contacted for an appeal? They've been dead for 12 millennia. Well, they're lucky. He was seated on a couch shaped like a semicircle and made of some memory foam-like substance that kept trying to adjust to his emotions. At one point, it puffed into a heart shape, and he nearly fell off. Servants offered him drinks in floating goblets. One of them hummed the Imperial Wedding March, a surprisingly catchy tune with a bass line he could vibe to. Calarea sat across from him, her expression unreadable. I suppose I owe you context, she said finally. Unless you're about to say this is all a prank show and Ashton Kutcher is hiding behind the plasma wall. Yes, please. Millennia ago, the rulers of Lurn decided their heirs must prove themselves by choosing a consort not from privilege, but from merit. A tournament was created, open to all species, all worlds. The one who overcomes every trial would be deemed worthy of the royal bond. And no one thought to mention that to the contestants? There is a footnote on the sign-up form. I don't read footnotes. I barely read the main notes. You survived 15 death rounds, outwitted psionic tacticians, and insulted a creature of war so thoroughly it forfeited. I thought that was a clown. The war clown of Zenthar is feared in 17 systems. Marcus rubbed his eyes. This is insane. I'm not ready for marriage. I still have coupons in my wallet from 2 apartments ago. Marriage can be postponed. The announcement, however, is done. To rescind it would be a dishonor. And I can't imagine telling a crowd of 10,000 that the royal wedding's off because the groom got cold feet and possibly mild acid burns. Precisely. He took a breath. Okay, what happens now? You will be fitted for ceremonial attire. Attend 3 days of diplomatic processions. Wave, smile. Do not insult any tentacled ambassadors. Then if you truly wish to leave, I will dissolve the union through private right. You mean divorce? We prefer mutual recalibration of fate. That's honestly kind of poetic. Calarea's mouth twitched, almost a smile. A floating orb buzzed overhead and announced, Consort Groom, you are scheduled for quantum bath soak and adaptive grooming in 2 minutes. Also, congratulations on your new royal identity, now accepting sponsorships from Synth Cola. Wait, I'm being sponsored by soda now? You are a public figure. I wore this shirt yesterday, and the day before. The orb projected a 3D image of him wearing a glowing Synth Cola cape. Not anymore. That evening, he stood in a guest suite the size of a warehouse, staring at a closet full of clothes that looked like they belonged to a fantasy video game villain and/or someone performing on a space opera stage. A small assistant robot hovered beside him. Would you like the gold trim velvet with solar thread embroidery? The bot chirped. Or the armored tunic with anti-grav pleats? Do you have jeans? Unclear. Is that a weapon? Marcus sighed. Never mind. Velvet it is. He walked to the balcony where the view stretched across the glowing city of Elseron's capital, high towers rising like obsidian feathers, shuttles buzzing in the distance like lazy fireflies. Somewhere down there, people believed in him now, or at least believed he hadn't tripped into victory purely by accident. He wasn't sure which was more terrifying. And behind him, Calarea's voice echoed softly from the doorway. You handled it well, better than expected. I once passed out at a surprise birthday party. She stepped beside him. Then you're more qualified than most galactic rulers. Marcus had never been to a diplomatic breakfast before, let alone one involving 12 species, 3 gravity settings, and at least 2 forms of time perception. Still half asleep and mostly dressed, he hadn't figured out how to fasten the 4th shoulder clasp on his ceremonial robe. He found himself seated at a long table shaped like a Mobius strip, with dishes hovering and rotating past him at predetermined intervals. A blob of orange something slid past. He wasn't sure if it was food or a dignitary. "Do not eat the Vorun envoy," Calarea whispered beside him, her voice steady as ever. "Right, yeah, of course. I was just admiring the ambassadorial viscosity." Across from him, a delegate composed entirely of floating cubes was laughing through synchronized harmonic vibrations. It was unclear if it found Marcus amusing or was just vibrating because of the caffeine mist currently being piped into the air. A bowl hovered in front of Marcus. It contained what looked like gelatin, but it wiggled in a suspiciously sentient manner. "What's this one?" he asked the server bot floating nearby. "Emotion pudding," it chirped. "Flavor adapts to your dominant mood." He dipped a spoon into it and took a bite. It tasted exactly like the time he failed his driver's test and tried to blame a squirrel for running a red light. He slid the bowl gently to the side. The breakfast was apparently part of the pre-betrothal pageantry. After all, nothing brought a galaxy together like awkward small talk, incompatible digestive systems, and at least one live feed to 50 million viewers. A news drone hovered nearby, trying to get his good side. He waved. The drone zoomed in. The corner of its lens displayed the phrase, "Groom blinks handsomely at universe." By mid-morning, Marcus was shuttled to the Hall of Harmonies for the recitation of the stars. According to Calarea, this involved publicly recounting one's lineage, achievements, and future intentions, traditionally delivered in song form. "I don't sing," Marcus said, as they were being fitted with ceremonial sound robes. Yes, robes that emitted background music based on mood. His currently played a nervous xylophone solo. "Then speak," Calarea replied, "but speak with intention. It is expected that you honor your path." "My path involved accidentally microwaving my own shoes once." "Then speak of your survival." The Hall of Harmonies was less a hall and more a sonic cathedral suspended in zero gravity. Each word spoken vibrated the air, and the audience floated in gentle orbit around a central stage of resonant crystal. Marcus floated awkwardly into position, clutching a microphone that doubled as a truth translator. One wrong word and the mic would politely auto-correct his lie into something dramatically more honest. He cleared his throat. Marcus Vane, Earthborn, apartment dweller, former assistant night manager of the Blurco's Interstellar Grill on Lunar Outpost 9. The mic translated it with a dramatic echo. "Flame tamer of the 9th Moon Forge. I came here by accident. I didn't know this was a real contest. I'm not a warrior or a genius or a noble." He walked unknowingly into destiny, a stranger to glory, yet unyielding. "I fell down a lot." He descended, and the cosmos made way. The crowd vibrated gently with what Marcus hoped was approval. "I don't know what I'm doing. I barely know what I'm wearing. But I promise I'll try not to embarrass the entire royal family or insult anyone who smells like pickles." He swears fealty to the uncertain and pledges honor against all odds. The crowd burst into harmonic applause. Somewhere in the soundscape, someone played a dramatic saxophone solo. After the ceremony, Marcus floated off the stage and into a corridor where Calarea was waiting. Her sound robe was playing a calm string melody with just a hint of triumph. "You speak well for someone with no idea what's happening," she said. "I've been improvising since breakfast." That was not obvious. A small orb zipped over. "Official fan club membership of the groom now exceeds 1 million. Trending topics include number reluctant royal, number Makraz mood, and number space boyfriend." Marcus squinted. "I'm famous now?" "Extremely. Do I get royalties?" "No," he sighed. "Figures." They walked, or rather glided, toward the east balcony, where a swarm of drones awaited to capture the couple's first official photo under the twin suns. Marcus struck what he thought was a regal pose. Calarea did not. "I've been meaning to ask," he said between flashes. Why me? Seriously. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she leaned against the railing, her long ears catching the solar wind like streamers. When I saw you survive those trials, not through brute force, but through chaos and wit, I remembered the founder's intention. A ruler must not only be strong, they must surprise the stars. You were unexpected, and the galaxy needs the unexpected. He considered this. That's either the nicest thing anyone said to me or a deeply poetic insult. It can be both. Back in the royal quarters, Marcus found a gift waiting for him, a crate labeled Human Groom Essentials, compiled by the Ministry of Cultural Translation. Inside were mismatched Earth artifacts, a basketball, 3 copies of the same cookbook, socks labeled official royal foot tubes, and a framed photo of what looked like a confused hamster. The tag read, Traditional Terran Totem. He sat on the couch. It adjusted into a throne shape. Guess I'm living the dream, he muttered. The couch emitted gentle trumpet music. There was a knock at the chamber door. When he opened it, a tiny creature in a postal uniform handed him a small cube. Message from the Department of Union Compliance, it squeaked. Urgent. The cube opened. A hologram of an elder appeared, wearing robes so ancient they might have been sentient. Due to the nature of the interspecies royal union, the hologram intoned, you are now subject to trial by consort verification to ensure the bond is authentic and not transactional. Please prepare for 5 days of evaluative ordeals, including but not limited to joint psychic combat, cooperative puzzle negotiation, and romantic aptitude testing. Have a stellar afternoon. The cube powered down. Marcus blinked. He looked back at Calarea, who had just arrived behind him, arms crossed. I thought I passed all the trials. That was just the wedding part. He stared at the now dark cube in his hand. This galaxy has so much paperwork. The verification trials began with what could only be described as the galactic equivalent of couples counseling. If the counselor were a 5-headed squid wearing bifocals, and the couch was a floating platform suspended above a vat of mildly annoyed acid. This is standard procedure, Calarea explained as they were ushered onto the levitating platform. It's to ensure the union is not forged under duress, manipulation, or excessive use of interstellar aphrodisiacs. I've only ever manipulated vending machines, Marcus muttered, and they always win. The squid being floated forward, adjusting its glasses on its third head. We will begin with the synchronization pulse. Please place your hands into the neural basin. The neural basin was a bowl that looked like it had stolen its design from an old lava lamp. It pulsed softly, emitting a low hum that Marcus suspected was either scanning his brain or trying to soothe him with jazz. When both their hands touched the glowing goo, Marcus felt a jolt. Not painful, but disorienting. Suddenly, he wasn't just aware of his own thoughts. He could feel Calarea's presence in his mind. Organized, quiet, slightly amused. His brain, by comparison, resembled a washing machine full of spaghetti. You are now temporarily linked, the squid announced. Please answer the following questions simultaneously. A chime sounded. What is your favorite smell? New ship plating, Calarea answered. Fresh popcorn, said Marcus at the same time. Interesting, said Head 3. Now, what is your deepest fear? Failure of my people. Public speaking, Marcus answered, then winced. Which is unfortunate given my new job description. The platform trembled approvingly. Now we will test cooperative logic under time constraints. You will be placed in a holographic maze that requires both of you to see through each other's eyes to escape. Please enjoy the simulated peril. A flash of light engulfed them, and suddenly they stood in a translucent cube full of moving walls, floating runes, and at least one mischievous holographic fox that kept stealing keys. I can't see anything, Marcus said, squinting. Everything's backwards? You're looking through my perspective, Calarea said, and you have my depth perception. That will take adjustment. I can barely see my own shoelaces in 3D. This is going to be, oh great, the fox just licked me. Working together required awkward shouting, several missteps into fake lava, and one moment where Marcus accidentally walked into a wall because he mistook a shadow for a doorway. But after 20 minutes, the maze folded in on itself with a satisfied pop, and they were back in the observation room. You achieved above-average synchrony, the squid said. You may now proceed to the romantic aptitude phase. Is this the one with the mood lighting and sensual aromatherapy? Marcus asked, regretting it instantly. No, Calarea said. It's the scavenger hunt. They were given a map of the Royal Botanical Sphere, a list of obscure plants with names like Flortha's Whisper and grub moss of the Seventh Dune, and a timer counting down from 3 hours. If we don't find these, do they take back my robes? Marcus asked, eyeing the golden trim of his outfit, which had begun humming again. No, Calarea replied. They erase a few hours of memory and mark the relationship as pending evaluation. It's considered embarrassing. And you say that like you've done this before. She didn't answer, but her ears twitched in a way Marcus was beginning to interpret as smiling on the inside. The botanical sphere was vast, an artificial jungle suspended in zero gravity, with floating islands, luminous vines, and bioluminescent fauna playing smooth jazz with their vocal sacs. The first item on the list was a bloom that reacts to laughter. Marcus tried telling it a joke about a photon checking into a hotel. The flower wilted. Calarea leaned in and whispered something in an ancient dialect that apparently translated to a joke about imperial tax audits. The flower blossomed like a sun. You're going to have to teach me that one, Marcus muttered. It doesn't translate well. It requires knowledge of 17,000 years of fiscal policy. The next plant required synchronized movement to reveal itself. They were forced to dance. Badly. Marcus had the rhythm of a malfunctioning traffic light, but Calarea adjusted, guiding him with subtle moves and the occasional nudge from her foot. You've clearly never danced before, she said. I have, Marcus defended. At my cousin's wedding. I was briefly banned from the dance floor. Why? I elbowed the cake. Eventually the flower emerged, vibrating in tune with their accidental two-step. By the end of the scavenger hunt, they were exhausted, covered in interstellar pollen, and laughing at a vine that refused to let go of Marcus's leg. You're sure this one isn't carnivorous? He asked as Calarea pried him free. Only on alternate Tuesdays. They returned to the evaluation chamber, handing over their collected items to a judging panel composed of alien elders, bored nobles, and one sentient lichen colony that offered a very polite applause. Successful completion, the squid announced. Only one final phase remains, the rite of shared challenge. You will face a simulated crisis of medium severity. Your cooperation and reaction will determine final suitability. Marcus groaned. Let me guess. Simulated how? By neural immersion, the squid replied cheerfully. Now please lie down and try not to panic. Marcus blinked. That's never a sentence that ends well. Moments later, he was falling through light, data, memory, and landed with a thud in the middle of what appeared to be a failing cargo ship spinning toward a binary sun. This feels a little more than medium severity, he yelled as alarms blared. Calarea appeared beside him, already in motion, pulling up a navigation schematic from a console. Life support down, she said. Thrusters offline, engine core overheating. Marcus looked around. Is there a not explode button? Together they scrambled to reroute power, seal off damaged sectors, and decipher the ship's ancient programming, which appeared to be written in a dialect based entirely on sarcasm and cat emojis. Marcus climbed into a maintenance duct, swearing as a cable shocked him lightly. Ow! Okay, that was not necessary unless this thing is sentient, in which case, I apologize to your motherboard. Calarea coordinated the rest, sending him instructions via neural link. His mind buzzed with her calm efficiency, her focus balancing his chaos. He made it to the final panel, pulled the override lever, and the ship stabilized just before impact. The simulation ended. They blinked back into reality. The squid clapped with 3 of its heads. Congratulations. You are now certified as a verified union. Let the wedding preparations resume. Marcus slumped in his chair. I need a sandwich and a nap, possibly in reverse order. Calarea stood beside him, brushing pollen from her shoulder. You did well. You did better. I had fewer electrical burns. He held up his hand, which still sparked slightly. Worth it, he said. Though if the actual wedding involves this much running, I may just elope with a vending machine. That would be frowned upon by the Ministry of Snack Diplomacy. They laughed, together this time, and for the first time since the contest ended, Marcus didn't feel like the galaxy's most confused groom, just its most unexpected one. The wedding wasn't on a planet, it was on a moon-sized ceremonial platform in orbit above 3 suns, synchronized to glow in romantic gradients just shy of retinal damage. The royal architects had called it celestial elegance. Marcus called it the world's most expensive disco ball with a seating arrangement. There were 10,000 guests. Some were humanoid, others resembled teapots, and at least one was a living cloud of legal disclaimers. Marcus stood near the center, flanked by 2 hovering ring-bearer drones shaped like miniature planets, each orbiting the other in a loving display of astrophysical metaphor. His suit had been grown overnight in a vat of adaptive nanoweave. It pulsed gently with his mood. When he'd first put it on, it turned a panicked yellow-green. Now it hovered somewhere between nervous lavender and hopeful orange. Calarea, in contrast, looked like serenity dipped in starlight. Her ceremonial robe trailed cosmic threads that shimmered with real-time constellations. Her ears were adorned with silver crescents, and her smile, rare and subtle, was aimed directly at him. "Remember the hand gesture sequence," she whispered. "I thought we agreed to skip the handshake of eternal harmony," he whispered back. "Number, we agreed you would practice it." "Right, I practiced it once. On a mirror. The mirror broke." Before they could argue further, the high harmonizer rose, 7 meters tall, semi-transparent, with a voice that resonated in the bones. "Let the union begin." The ceremony involved multiple steps, symbolic offerings, a joint lighting of the beacon of unity, and the formal declaration spoken in 5 languages simultaneously, including one entirely composed of scent. Marcus managed 4, sneezed the 5th, and was told it still counted. Then came the personal vows. Calarea spoke first. Her words were elegant, steady, touched with something ancient. "I did not seek you, but you arrived, and the stars do not make mistakes. You are chaos shaped like a man, and I find peace in it." Marcus swallowed. He hadn't written his. He wasn't even sure he could match her poetry, so he went with honesty. "I thought I came here by accident, but every time I tried to run, something pulled me back. Maybe it was gravity. Maybe it was you. You didn't need me to be perfect. You let me be confused. You let me be human. I'll probably mess this up a lot, but I'm staying because I don't want to be anywhere else." The high harmonizer's head, or possibly decorative orb, glowed white. "Do you enter into this union willingly?" "I do," Calarea said. "I do," Marcus echoed. A soft ripple of light passed over the platform, and thousands of alien guests burst into cheers, harmonic songs, and one celebratory screech so high-pitched it knocked over 3 chairs. The ceremony concluded with a first dance. Marcus expected something simple. He was wrong. A gravity shift tilted the platform. Musical pulses surged through the floor. Calarea took his hand and stepped into a whirl of slow-motion anti-grav choreography. He flailed at first, spinning like a confused jelly bean, but she steadied him, guiding him through a slow orbit around the core of the dance space. Their feet never touched the ground. For a moment, it was just them and the stars. Later, during the reception, Marcus found himself talking to a group of dignitaries from the Galactic Culinary Coalition. "Your handling of the emotion pudding was masterful," said one, nodding its head, which was also a spoon. "I survived it," Marcus said. "Barely. The taste of childhood regret is stronger than expected." By the buffet, he spotted the ambassador blob from the breakfast again. It waved a pseudopod at him. "You made quite the impression," Calarea said, joining him. "Do we really have to go back to the royal palace after this?" he asked. "Not immediately," she said. "We have a week before the summit of interstellar siblings." "Sounds exhausting." "It is, but we'll face it together." He leaned against her slightly. She didn't pull away. "Can I ask you something?" "You may." "What would have happened if I lost the competition?" She tilted her head. "You would have been escorted home with honor and memory erasure. The prize bond would have defaulted to the runner-up." The guy with 12 arms and the plasma hammer? He weeps easily. Marcus stared off into the distance, where stars blinked lazily above the artificial atmosphere. You know, I used to think I didn't belong anywhere. And now? I think I belong exactly where I didn't expect to be. Calarea nodded. As do I. They stood in silence for a while, watching dignitaries slow dance in low gravity, diplomats attempt karaoke in reverse time, and a small robot serve drinks while quoting obscure Terran philosophers. Eventually, the royal transport arrived. It looked like a giant jellyfish made of chrome. As they boarded, a final drone zipped in to capture their departure. Marcus waved again. Still trending, the drone announced. New title, number sign Royal Himbo of the Stars. Marcus laughed. Yeah, I'll take it. Inside the ship, he sat beside Calarea. The seats adjusted automatically to their biosignatures. The stars stretched beyond the curved window as the ship lifted off, gliding silently into open space. So, he said, what now? Now we lead. I meant tonight. Oh, you sleep. I review council documents. You're going to be reading legal scrolls and I'll be drooling into a pillow. As it should be. The stars slipped past them, infinite and flickering. And Marcus, former assistant night manager, accidental champion, verified consort, closed his eyes with the quiet certainty of someone who had finally, completely, unintentionally found his place in the universe. The artificial night above Neo-Tokyo Orbit Station shimmered with programmed constellations, fake stars for fake peace. Kale sat at his cluttered workstation, elbows deep in the exposed circuits of a vintage cleaning droid that smelled faintly of burnt soy oil and defeat. You realize, Zib, that no one uses ethanol for coolant anymore, right? He said to no one in particular. The droid made a static wheeze, which Kale took as either agreement or mild resentment. You're lucky you're cute, you walking microwave. He adjusted the magnification on his cybernetic right eye and reached for a soldering pen. Behind him, his kettle hissed like a moody serpent. His apartment, if it could be called that, was more parts and wires than livable space. On the far wall, a half-disassembled android torso served as a coat rack. The coat belonged to his neighbor, who claimed she only left it there temporarily 3 months ago. Kyle didn't argue. Less surface area for the dust to settle. Somewhere 3 levels below, a hover rickshaw honked in Morse code profanity. He missed her sometimes. Real trees, real coffee, real gravity. Not enough to go back, of course. Earth still wanted to arrest him for a minor misunderstanding involving a prototype mind-linked neural transmitter and a senator's toupee, but enough that occasionally he tried to grow a tomato plant. They always died, like his last 3 relationships. Kale sighed and nudged the droid's processor. It sparked, then belched out a burst of binary curses. Good morning to you too, buddy. Unseen by Kale, perched above in the shadows of a ventilation grid, Lyra crouched like a blade poised midair. Her senses filtered every sound in the room, parsing his tone, his movements, the weird way his hair always stuck out at one angle, like a poorly rendered physics sim. He didn't look dangerous. He looked like someone who'd argue online about toaster rights, but appearances were irrelevant. Lyra had never failed a mission, not once. Not through the radioactive jungles of Orthon Prime, not during the infiltration of the Titan arcology, and definitely not while eliminating the last 3 humans on her hit list, all of whom begged, bribed, or offered exotic cheeses in a bid to escape. Kyle hadn't noticed her yet. She tilted her head, narrowing her eyes. His biometric signature matched the target. Kyle Renner, former military scientist, engineer of AI-guided kinetic munitions, wanted for treason by 3 major alliances and 1 galactic book club that took punctuality very seriously. And yet, he talked to his kettle. She reviewed her infiltration log again. Entry, 0802 hours, station time. Objectives, observe, confirm target, eliminate. Optional, extract neural interface tech if intact. Do not engage emotionally. Do not engage socially. Do not consume native sugar-based snacks. So far, she'd broken 2 of those rules. The snack thing was an accident. How could she know Frosty Zaps were addictive? Cal stood and stretched. Okay, Zib, I'm grabbing lunch. Try not to blow up the apartment while I'm gone. Or do. Honestly, I could use the insurance payout. He stepped into his jacket, still not noticing it wasn't his, and walked out. Lyra followed. Neo-Tokyo Orbit Station pulsed with artificial life. Billboards blinked ads in 40 languages, half of them real. A hover train whooshed past above as Kale ambled into one of the many open-air market domes layered between housing sectors. He moved like someone who didn't know assassins were a possibility in his daily schedule. He stopped to argue with a merchant bot about the freshness of lab-grown fish-flavored protein fillies, then paid twice the asking price because he forgot to turn off his translator overlay. Lyra watched from a scaffold above. The wind from the ventilation turbines caught the edges of her coat. She shifted position, narrowing her view through her scope, lining up the vector. One smooth shot. Simple. Done. Walk away. Kyle sneezed violently and dropped his lunch. The vendor bot yelled something offensive in binary. Kyle responded by flipping it off in sign language. Lyra's finger hovered near the trigger. Then he knelt and picked up the spilled food, only to hand it to a beggar child with metal limbs and wide, luminous eyes. I was going to eat it, Kyle said with a shrug, but I suspect it wanted to be free. The child giggled, nodded, and scampered off. Lyra blinked. Her targeting HUD flickered. A subroutine hiccuped and tried to initiate a data purge. She overrode it. Mission integrity at 97%. This was stupid. He was stupid. And worse, she found herself mildly amused. That was unacceptable. She recalibrated the scope, re-engaged heat sensors, and... Hey, Kale said aloud, frowning slightly. She froze. Did he see her? Number. He was talking to the vending machine. You and me need to have a conversation about ethical snack pricing. You think I won't reprogram you? The machine beeped aggressively. He beeped back. Lyra deactivated the scope. She followed him for another 3 hours. Through a noodle stall, he insisted on making the chef explain the broth recipe like it was national security. A cyber pet shop, where he tried to pet a lizard that turned into mist. And a retro arcade, where he lost a round of Space Kraken dance-off and blamed gravitational drift. Mission integrity at 83%. The longer she observed, the more the lines blurred. He didn't match any of the psych profiles. Not the cold tactician, not the hidden warlord. He was a guy. A guy who played harmonica badly and said ow when he bumped into trash cans. By the time he returned home, arms full of groceries and one badly dented harmonica, Lyra found herself perched outside his window, still watching, still calculating, still not pulling the trigger. Instead, she hacked the apartment's external sensor node and disabled the alarm, just in case. Then she sat on the edge of the building, watching him feed his tomato plant and give it a pep talk like it had a mortgage to pay. This was going to be the strangest mission of her life, and probably the funniest. Kyle woke to the sound of his fridge humming in Morse code. At first, he thought it was a dream, a weird one involving sentient fruit staging a rebellion. But when he stumbled out of bed, hair skewed sideways like a drunken antenna, he confirmed 2 things. 1, he had indeed passed out while watching Battle Maids of Betelgeuse again, and 2, his fridge had somehow learned to communicate in military encryption protocols. He squinted. If this is about me eating the last frozen burrito, we've talked about consent, Harold. The fridge beeped indignantly. Kyle made a note to stop naming appliances after historical figures. He shuffled across the floor, tripping over a power cord and landing face first into the couch. The couch groaned, literally. He forgot it had an emotional state regulator installed. He turned it off with a grunt and reached for the kettle. Morning, kettle. Still hate me? The kettle beeped once, flat and judgmental. Lyra was already there. Not inside, of course. That would require an invitation, or at least disabling 15 lock systems. She wasn't ready for that level of intimacy. Yet. She clung to the ceiling outside the main window, camouflaged in a stealth suit so advanced it practically whispered state secrets to itself when bored. She had watched Kale for 5 nights now. 5. Her people would consider that excessive. Her commanding officer would call it compromise. Her onboard AI had simply gone silent, as if protesting her refusal to act. She justified the delay as information gathering. After all, he could be faking it, playing some absurdly long con. Maybe he was so dangerous, so deranged that he disguised himself as a bumbling disaster just to throw assassins off his scent. Maybe. Or maybe he really was singing to his plant again. She checked her sound feed. Yep. The tomato plant was now Sir Tomato III and had recently been knighted in an impromptu ceremony involving a spatula. She was losing her edge. She tapped her neural interface, bringing up her personal log. Her mission notes had grown erratic. Instead of standard kill probabilities, they now included things like asks philosophical questions to vending machines and possibly allergic to sincerity. Last night, he'd made soup. Not out of a packet, real soup, with spices. It was the most human thing she'd ever seen. And this morning, well, Kel returned from his brief kitchen battle carrying a half-toasted piece of bread and a mug of something that smelled like motor oil and sadness. He sat down at his workbench, humming to himself, and resumed tinkering with a half-broken drone. His goggles slipped down his nose. Then he did something that froze Lyra in place. He looked directly at her. No alarms, no weapons. Just a slow, curious glance toward the window. She didn't move. He raised his mug in her direction and said, "You know, if you're going to keep hanging around, I should at least charge you rent." Her breath caught. Then he turned back to the drone. "What kind of assassin uses the same perch 4 nights in a row?" he added, half to himself. "Honestly, that's just lazy." Her first impulse was to vanish. Smoke grenade, zip line, vanish into the void, vanish. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed right where she was, her pulse elevated, her mind racing. Kel didn't look up again. Instead, he began fiddling with a tiny chip, muttering under his breath about outdated firmware and the philosophical dilemma of self-aware vending bots. Lyra dropped from the ceiling 2 minutes later. Quietly. She landed behind him with no more sound than a shadow changing direction. Her blade stayed holstered. Cal didn't flinch. "I upgraded your fridge," she said. He nodded. "Thought so. It's threatening to report me for crimes against cuisine." They stood in silence. Cal adjusted a screw. Lyra studied the back of his head like it was a sacred artifact. Finally, she asked, "Why didn't you run?" Cal paused. Then in a tone so dry it might have caused static, replied, "What? And leave my collection of cursed coffee mugs? Never." Lyra raised an eyebrow. Kyle finally turned in his chair. He studied her, really studied her, for the first time. The long, sharply pointed ears, the eyes like galactic storms, swirling with faint traces of ultraviolet light, the faint glow beneath her skin, visible only at certain angles. He exhaled slowly. "You're not here for my soup recipe, are you?" She shook her head. "Well," he said, stretching out the word like it weighed something, "at least you have good taste in targets." Lyra blinked. That wasn't the response she had trained for. "I was supposed to kill you." He nodded, unsurprised. "I figured. The whole lurking in shadows and watching me brush my teeth vibe was a clue. I've studied your file, your history, the things you created." His eyes darkened for the first time. "That file leave out the part where I tried to dismantle them all? It says you vanished." "I did." He picked up the drone, resumed tinkering, walked away, got tired of building better ways to end people. Lyra stepped closer. She shouldn't have. Proximity lowered reaction time. Her own protocols screamed at her, but she ignored them. "You don't seem dangerous," she said quietly. Kyle looked up. "You haven't seen me dance." "A beat." She stared. He smirked. "I'm serious. It's a safety hazard." Her mouth twitched. A twitch. Her first real facial slip in years. She covered it quickly, but the damage was done. Cale leaned back, hands behind his head. "So, what now?" "I don't know." Her voice had lost its usual steel. "This has never happened before." "You mean your targets usually die?" "Number, I mean. They usually don't feed stray cats and sing lullabies to their toaster." "Ah," he nodded sagely. "I'm an outlier." "You're absurd. You say that like it's a bad thing." She didn't respond. The silence grew thick. Not uncomfortable, just loaded, like the air before gravity remembered it existed. Kale looked up again. This time his eyes were softer. You hungry? Lyra blinked. I make a mean grilled algae sandwich. It's mostly mean because it screams during cooking, but still. You're offering food to your assassin. He shrugged. You haven't killed me yet. That counts for something. She hesitated. And then, impossibly, she said, I like soup. Cal smiled. Then soup it is. Cal stirred the pot with the same focus one might give to deactivating a bomb. The ladle, formerly part of a drone arm, groaned under the weight of the protein-rich broth, algae cubes, and a floating spice pod that occasionally blinked in protest. It's not real soup unless it blinks at you, he said with a sage nod. Lyra sat at the workbench, studying the room like it might leap at her. She hadn't removed her weapons, though they were no longer pointed at anything in particular, and her posture was relaxed enough to suggest she was at least 90% sure he wasn't about to poison her. This place is a disaster, she said, watching a dust-covered bot in the corner try to eat a sock. I like to call it organized entropy. It smells like you cooked something alive in here last week. Technically, I did, and it got better. She raised an eyebrow. The food? The creature. Kyle ladled out 2 steaming bowls and handed one to her with all the pomp of a street vendor who just discovered theater. Lyra sniffed it. Then she tasted it. Her expression shifted infinitesimally. You didn't replicate this. Nope. You used actual ingredients. Even grew the algae myself. In the shower. Accidentally. She stared at him, uncertain whether to be impressed or concerned. Kyle slurped his soup. So you gonna tell me what Empire wants me gone this time? She stirred her bowl, not answering. He tapped his spoon on the edge of the bowl. Come on, I've got a pool going with my toaster. We're betting on which syndicate it is. You talk to your toaster? It has opinions, mostly about bagel hierarchy. Lyra didn't smile, but her ear twitched. He noticed. I was sent by the Calyx Directive, she said finally. Your inventions destabilized a dozen systems. They consider you too dangerous to live. That's fair, Kel said. I used to agree. Used to. I thought building smart weapons would make war cleaner, more humane. No more soldiers, just machines making decisions based on logic and ethics. Lyra paused. That sounds surprisingly noble. Yeah. Until a swarm drone reclassified a hospital as a temporary command node because someone set up a communications repeater on the roof. The silence between them wasn't heavy, just quiet. Cal set his bowl down. I walked, faked my death, spent the next 3 years making sure none of it could be rebuilt. Lyra stared at her soup, then said, You're not what I expected. I get that a lot. A beeping interrupted the moment. Cal glanced at a blinking panel on the wall. Oh, great. The door sensor's freaking out again. He walked over, tapped the screen. Lyra's eyes sharpened. What is it? Someone's in the hallway. How many? 1. Armed? Carrying 4 shopping bags and a glitched-out synth poodle. The door chimed. Kale opened it. Kyle, shouted a voice like an off-key trumpet. Why won't your vacuum bot stop threatening me? A woman in a long silver coat stormed in, her pink synth poodle yapping as it jittered from side to side like it had seen the code of the universe and rejected it. Kyle sighed. Hi, Miriam. You promised to fix the dog. Now it won't stop quoting 21st century philosophers and trying to eat my floor tiles. Kel gestured to Lyra. Miriam, this is Lyra. She was going to kill me but decided to have soup instead. Miriam didn't even blink. You're dating again? Good. You need someone who isn't made of wires and bad choices. Lyra blinked. We're not. Miriam waved a hand. Sure. No labels. Live your truth. The synth poodle walked up to Lyra and barked, Cogito, ergo bark. Lyra tilted her head. This, creature quotes Descartes? Kel took a long sip of soup. Last week it was Nietzsche. Honestly, I preferred the existential dread. Miriam dropped the bags on the counter. You fix him or I'm sending the cleaners over to replace your apartment with a meditation garden. She stormed out, synth poodle in tow. Silence returned. Lyra looked at Kale. You live in chaos. I prefer the term statistical improbability. The moment was broken again, this time by a ping from Kale's terminal. He read the alert, then frowned. What is it? Lyra asked, standing. Hmm. Ship movement near the station. Unmarked. No beacon. She crossed the room in 2 strides, reading the screen over his shoulder. Her fingers flew across the interface, decoding the signal's bounce patterns and power emissions. That's a Calyx interceptor, which means they're here for round 2. She turned to him. We need to go. You mean I need to go? You're still technically on their side. I didn't drop my sword because I got bored, Kale. He stared at her, then nodded. Right. Lyra moved quickly, pulling up schematics of the station. If we take the ventilation shafts near Subsector 9, we can reach a private dock without tripping internal sensors. Kale reached for his jacket. Great. You know I have weak knees, right? I'll carry you if you complain. Tempting, but undignified. He paused. Wait, what about Harold? Lyra blinked. Who's Harold? The fridge. We'll get him a new identity. I knew you were the one. They slipped out through a maintenance panel behind the couch, Kyle grumbling all the way about lost groceries and rogue appliances. Lyra moved ahead, scanning for hostiles, her senses sharp and posture fluid. Kyle followed with a bag of tools and a soup thermos. You really think they'll chase us? He asked as they ducked into a tunnel. They won't stop until you're dead. Romantic. I mean that literally. Still counts. And as the tunnel lights flickered and the air grew cold, Kel realized something strange. He wasn't afraid. He was having fun. You know, Kale grunted as he crawled through the ventilation shaft behind Lyra. I always imagined escape tunnels would have better lighting. Do you often imagine escape tunnels? She called over her shoulder. Only when I upgrade my toaster. It gets aggressive when threatened. She didn't laugh, but the faintest sound in her throat betrayed amusement. The shaft was tight, filled with the scent of ionized dust and the occasional spark from the aging magnetic clamps that held it together. Kyle paused to smack one of them back into place when it tried to hum at him suggestively. Seriously, this place is flirting with me. That's your fault for treating maintenance with affection. I'm a people person, and apparently a pipe person too. Lyra reached a junction, paused, then gestured silently. Kyle crept up beside her and peeked down the shaft. Below them, 2 Calyx operatives stood in full reflective armor, the visors pulsing faint blue with HUD data. Their rifles were folded into compact carry modes, but the lethal quiet in their posture told Kyle all he needed to know. They don't look like the negotiation type, he whispered. Calyx doesn't negotiate with engineers, Lyra replied. Even ones with charming personalities? They listed that as a secondary threat vector. Fair. She scanned the shaft network again, her ocular overlay painting the walls with tactical data. There's another hatch 30 meters down, leads to Subsector 9A. From there we can slip into the cargo bay. Kyle blinked. Wait, that's the old zoo module, isn't it? Technically, yes. Didn't that place get shut down because the zero-gravity octolemurs wouldn't stop staging musical numbers? They were rehomed. Rehomed where? She gave him a look. You don't want to know. They move fast, or rather, Lyra moved fast. Kyle moved like someone whose knees had signed a ceasefire agreement with his ambition. When they reached the hatch, he dropped through after her, landing in a crouch that immediately betrayed his lack of exercise and possibly a pulled something. I think I tore my dignity, he wheezed. No vital organs then, Lyra replied, already scanning the corridor ahead. They slipped past flickering holosigns. Welcome to Biohabitat Sector 9, and avoided the abandoned security drones that now slept peacefully in dormant nests made of shredded brochures and synthetic vines. I miss when zoos just had cages, Kyle muttered. Lyra slowed as they neared the cargo elevators. Once we get to the hangar, I can hotwire a transport. We'll need to reach the asteroid belt and scramble our heat signature. Easy. You forget. I invented the blueprint for Calyx's original scanner net. She gave him a sharp glance. You what? I was very employed once, then slightly more unemployed, explosively even. The elevator doors hissed open, revealing a platform that hadn't been cleaned since whatever bizarre zoo animal/scientist revolution had taken place years ago. Sticky residue clung to the railings. A sign read, "Please do not feed the theoretical creatures." I don't like how vague that is, Kale said. Lyra ignored it, activating the panel. Sparks flew and the platform jolted violently before descending with a noise that sounded suspiciously like a sigh of mechanical despair. Above them, a faint explosion shook the shaft. "They found the apartment," Lyra said. "Poor Harold." "The fridge? He didn't ask for this life." Cal pulled out a small spherical device from his coat. He flicked it, and it began to hover, spinning softly. Lyra didn't reply, but after a moment, she reached over and flicked a small switch near his elbow. "What's that?" he asked. "Emergency noise filter." The ship's cockpit suddenly became blissfully silent. Cale's voice muted mid-sentence as he enthusiastically explained the aerodynamic properties of breakfast-themed spacecraft. Lyra stared out the window at the stars, one corner of her mouth threatening to smile, just a little. Then she turned off the filter. "And that's why pancakes are the most aerodynamic of all Earth foods," Cale finished proudly. Lyra said nothing, but she didn't turn the filter back on. The wandering pancake coasted through the corona mist of the Sigma drift, its hull humming with static defiance and leftover soup fumes. Inside, Kel was face-deep in rewiring the comms console while upside down, humming an off-key version of "Stellar Dust in My Circuits," a song that hadn't been popular even in the year it was invented by a malfunctioning karaoke droid. "This is either going to unlock a secure relay or send a distress signal to a race of sentient kitchen appliances," he muttered. Lyra sat in the pilot seat, knees up, chin resting on her hand, watching the stars spin lazily by. "I vote kitchen appliances. At least then, you'd be among your people." Kyle gave her a thumbs up without looking. "Nothing says family like a blender that can disembowel you for mispronouncing salsa." The console sparked. Lyra didn't flinch. "There we go. Signal cracked," Kyle said proudly, dropping out of the panel like a triumphant raccoon. "The Calyx won't be tracking us anymore unless they suddenly develop a taste for conspiracy podcasts and old government ping loops." She raised an eyebrow. "What did you reroute the signature through?" "The paranoid orbital blogosphere. If Calyx wants to find us, they'll have to wade through 6 hours of a guy named Nebulan Steve talking about how the moon owes him child support." Lyra stood, walking to the viewport. She stared out into the emptiness, voice soft. "It won't last. They'll find us eventually." "Probably," Cale said, brushing dust from his jacket. "But by then, I'll have reprogrammed the pancake to pretend to be an asteroid with a gambling addiction." She didn't smile, not exactly, but she stepped a little closer to him. "You could come with me," he offered. "I already did." "No, I mean, beyond running, beyond hiding. What if we stop just surviving?" She turned to face him, her long ears twitching subtly, betraying the swirl of thoughts behind her sharp gaze. "I was raised in silence, no laughter, no color, just orders, targets, and routines. Then I came to kill a man who offered me soup. To be fair, it was very good soup." She tilted her head. "You are strange. And proud. There's an award somewhere." "You confuse me," she admitted, "but I don't dislike it." Cal put a hand behind his neck. "Wow, I didn't expect a confession today. I wore my fugitive casual outfit." She walked toward the nav controls. "There's a planet near here, uninhabited. Old terraforming project gone dormant. I can finish it." "You terraform now?" "I downloaded a few manuals, and I reprogrammed the habitat drones while you were sleeping." Kyle blinked. "What do you mean while I was sleeping?" "I have a high boredom threshold. You snore like a slug whale in heat. I am majestic when I sleep. You drooled on the flight panel." "Battle sweat." She turned, amused. "Will you come? With you to a half-dead planet in the middle of nowhere, to build something from scratch while occasionally being hunted by people in sparkly armor?" "Yes." Kyle gave a small smile. "Sounds like retirement." The wandering pancake shifted course, heading toward a sun-kissed dot in the corner of nowhere. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was full of possibility. They landed near a dried riverbed. The sky was bruised orange, the wind thick with potential. Lyra deployed the habitat spheres, repurposed drones from a long-abandoned colonist kit, and within hours they had a shelter, a solar grid, and a security fence made of aggressively sarcastic laser turrets. Cale named the first patch of algae grass Greg. Weeks passed, then months. Cal discovered a hidden love for hydroponic gardening and bad ukulele playing. Lyra developed a disturbing affinity for poetry written by obsolete AI. They built irrigation systems and watched storms roll in from the edge of the canyon cliffs. They fought over chair designs and made up over cups of synth coffee and radioactive marshmallows. One evening, while Cale adjusted the alignment on their atmospheric processor with a wrench that had definitely once been part of a toilet, Lyra came up behind him. "Calix is gone." He looked up, squinting in the sun. "You sure?" "They've been dissolved. Internal collapse, civil unrest. No more directives. No more hunters." Kyle leaned back on his elbows. "So, you're free?" She nodded slowly. He smiled. "You going to leave then? Find something else out there?" Lyra stared at the rolling fields they'd grown together. "I already found it." The wind picked up, stirring the air with the scent of ionized moss and grilled protein discs. Kyle stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "You know, I used to think my legacy would be machines," he said. "Weapons, systems, data. But maybe it's a planet full of sarcastic turrets and edible ferns." He looked at her. "Maybe it's you." She blinked. "That's terribly sentimental." "I'm underfed," Lyra turned, walking back toward the shelter. "I'll make dinner." "Please, no algae cubes. No promises." They settled into a rhythm that didn't need running, or weapons, or survival hacks. Just days that started with sunrises and ended with stars. Days where a weapon who had never lived learned how to be alive, and an inventor who once wanted to disappear became someone who could stay. In time, the wandering pancake grew vines along its hull and became part of the landscape, a monument to flight and to choosing not to flee. Somewhere across the galaxy, old beacons still blinked, unaware that their quarry had stopped being prey. And in a valley touched by two suns and a reluctant stream, a long-eared woman wrote poems about silence. And a man who made soup saved the universe by not saving it at all.